Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. I told you guys that I was going to try and go live consistently, and here we are. This time with a special guest once again. I had Marquis Shimo on to preview Week 4's matchup between Clemson and Florida State. Now I have a fellow Michigan friend and Michigan fan is what I meant to say, but also friend of the channel. On Instagram, he has an account called College Football Stats, and we're here to talk about Nebraska against Michigan and kind of review that because him and I have some concerns. We also have some things that we're excited for as Michigan fans. We're also, though, going to talk about different picks for this week's games, like Auburn, Georgia, Duke, Notre Dame. We'll get to all of that. But I wanted to introduce Key here, and he's a friend of the channel. Um, Honestly, great guy, produces great content. You can find his Instagram content in the description, and he covers different games, and he's really focused on the statistical elements of different games, and he's pursuing data science and going to school for that, and that's very good. I took a data science class, and I have to say that that's something that would be good for me, especially since I admire looking at the game through a statistical lens. But here we are, and how are you doing, Key? I'm very excited myself. I'm also nervous for this game against Nebraska. But before we get into that, uh, let's answer some of the questions here. And I'll let, of course, you have your input here. Okay, so music for me, 007, big Ohio State fan. Really followed this channel for a while, comments on almost all of my videos. A question that he has. Hey Sam, saw a question on X, formerly known as Twitter. How many teams do you think have a legitimate shot at winning a championship? I'm assuming that means national championship. What are your thoughts on this? Just just a minute. People are saying that they can't hear the That's my bad. Shoot. Okay, guys, that's my bad. I forgot to turn on desktop audio on OBS, but I think we'll be up and running here. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. It's on me. Okay. Uh, can you hear us now? Testing 1 2 3. Can you hear me, Key?
Yep.
Okay. Can you all hear him now? That's my bad. Yeah, I had it on. I had desktop audio muted because I have a bunch of tabs open for like research,
Right.
but they have like a bunch of ads playing. It's really annoying. Okay, you still can't hear the guest. Okay, you still can't hear the guest. Says Party Pat. It sounds like all good now. Okay. Okay. So to answer Music for Me's question, let's go over this again. And I'm sorry about that, everyone. You said you were talking. You said you were listening to Joel Klatt about teams that were above the line, like teams who actually have the capacity to win, a national championship. So who are the teams that Klatt listed? I typically watch his stuff on and off. This week's been very busy for me, though. What do you have to inform us on?
I can't really grasp every team that he had above the line by heart, but he had teams of Washington, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and that's just off the top of my head. If you guys have the rest of the teams, let us know in the comment section down below. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think that I think Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, I think those teams have capability too. Washington's interesting because they don't have the typically required blue chip ratio to win it all. But I think that with their quarterback play and their wide receivers and their defense, I mean, they have Braden Trice, and then they have another player on the opposite side of the defensive line who's really good, and both of them are NFL pass rushers, and they have an elite offensive line. And I would also say that Texas, they're complete. They have 5 stars and 4 stars everywhere, and Ewers has been playing well. Sarkisian has built his team into a second half team that can finish, and they have Jatavion Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Worthy, Noah Whittington, and I'd say Texas, Washington, the big three, who in my mind are Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. Washington, I have ranked ahead of two of those three teams in my top 10 poll. But I think that they're just playing impressive football. They're being very efficient. But Georgia and Ohio State have more talent than Washington, have a lot higher of a ceiling. And for Michigan, I think they also have more talent and a higher ceiling as well. Florida State's interesting too, but I think at that point we're getting closer and closer to 50-50. Oregon, Hummus Hero just mentioned Oregon, and I think Oregon. What do you think about that, Key? I think that's a very underrated selection.
I have to agree. I need to see a little bit more from their linebacker play. That's that's a part of their defense against Colorado that I didn't really learn from. Their defensive line obviously was great. I believe they sacked Shador Sanders 8 times,
Yeah.
and their secondary was borderline unstoppable. So if their linebacker play can, you know, give me something to learn about them, then they practically have all the pieces to at least contend for a national title.
Yeah, I mean Jordan Birch is good. We knew that in the preseason, and their D line defensive back room looked good. Defensive back, I'm curious to see because I think Oregon was just so dominant on offense and in the trenches that even if Oregon is a suspect secondary, Colorado is under too much pressure to perform. Before we get further into the video, happy birthday, Minnie. Minnie is a friend of the channel. I believe, yeah, yes, she is. I remember from a Corn Crazed live where I saw her commenting. She is a Nebraska fan. Even though we're facing off against you all tomorrow, and I hope that Michigan wins in the most dominant fashion. Happy birthday, and go Big Red. And also, music for me 007. Oregon at Washington, October 14th. That is going to be a clash of titans. I have both of those teams in my top six.
I'm excited for that game too. Actually, a few days ago, I was just speaking about this game, and I had said that this game could potentially indicate who secures a spot in the Pac-12 championship game. Me personally, I have Washington winning this game because of home field, and I just feel like the receivers are going to be too much for Oregon's secondary. But like you said, this should be a clash of titans. I can't wait for this one.
Absolutely. And we still have like 2 weeks of football left. In fact, yeah, we have this weekend, we have week 5 and week 6. This is a week 7 game. Um I think Washington, this might be a bold prediction. From what I can tell, I think they have the better defense, and I think they have the higher ceiling on offense, but Oregon has a much better rushing attack. Part of that is due to injuries on Washington's side. Um,
Yep.
so we came here to talk about Michigan and Nebraska. That's why Key wanted to come on the channel, was mainly to talk about this game and provide his own insight on this. He has, he's a Michigan fan like me, but he's credible. He's pretty objective, and I'd like to get your perspective on this game. Like, what does this game mean for both of these teams? Not just Michigan playing their first road game, but also Nebraska hosting the number 2 team in the country.
All right. I'm gonna start off with the home team and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I feel like this game for them, this is huge because these two teams have a lot of history. They're two of the biggest brands in college football. This game right here, this game is just as important, as it is for Michigan in a historical standpoint, correct? Like, for Nebraska in this game, they have nothing to lose whatsoever. So while their offense, which is one of the most stagnant offenses I've seen to this point, they may just throw the kitchen sink at Michigan. They have nothing to lose whatsoever. It all comes down to their coaching. Like I said, their offense as a whole, and if they can adjust to what Michigan may do, whether it's passing downfield or running downfield. Let's see if they can keep it up with the rush defense. Like I said, they have a top 2 defense in the country. Um, we'll see how they, perform from that aspect.
Yeah, yeah, they have number 2 rushing defense in the country, and they have faced they faced Colorado, who can't run the football against almost anyone. They faced, Louisiana Tech, Northern Illinois, and then Minnesota. They faced Minnesota before they found their number 1 back in Darius Taylor. But it's still very impressive what they've done on defense in year 1 with the new scheme. And, Eric Chenander, Scott Frost, Matt Lubick, whoever the offensive coordinator, he had multiple across his tenure. Frost did. Ruined that program, didn't help get them back on track. And what he's done in year 1 with the disaster that Jeff Sims and the offense as a whole really has been, due to a variety of factors, is impressive. I like what you said about Nebraska not having anything to lose. What do you think they're going to do or try to do to Michigan's defense? Like you said, throw the kitchen sink at him. I totally believe in that. What do you think they will do, and what do you think's the most effective way for them to attack this Michigan defense?
If I'm Nebraska, I'll try a couple of trick plays, try to see if Michigan's defense can try to see if Nebraska's offense can get Michigan's defense guessing. They don't want to be too predictable, otherwise they may get shut down by our defensive line, which has been awesome this year. Um, if I am the Nebraska quarterback, I think his name is Harburg, if I'm not mistaken. What am I going to do to make sure I don't make mistakes in this game? I have to be borderline mistake free in order to at least try to compete in this game.
Yeah,
So that's what I feel like they have to do offensively. They have to make sure they keep Michigan's defense guessing.
yeah. That's something I agree with. If they're having success running the ball, and Harburg's looked amazing with his legs. I mean, Harburg right now, he's only 278 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. All of this is on 47 completions, and that on itself isn't impressive whatsoever. In fact, it's like below average passing. But then you look at his rushing total behind an offensive line that still has yet to really recover from Scott Frost and from guys like Turner Corcoran and other recruits who just haven't panned out. 42 carries, 272 yards. He's averaging 6.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. If him and Anthony Grant are having success running the ball, they also have to pass because I think Michigan's defense is too good, too great to where they're going to let a team physically pound them for 4 quarters, 3 quarters, or maybe even a half. At some point, they're going to adapt. So I think I completely agree with you. Mistake free, and they also have to be creative. They can't come out and expect passion to carry them with a bland scheme.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think about, we just talked about Heinrich Harburg and how his ground threat really adds to him, because if he was just a passing quarterback, didn't have his legs, with those statistics and watching his play too, he's still a young guy. He's giving it his all as a born and raised Cornhusker fan. He's giving it his all, but the legs add a different dimension to him. I know McCarthy isn't the same. I think we both agree on that. He's not the same, dual threat guy. But McCarthy has been keeping defenses honest who've been stacking the box. And we saw that a lot against Rutgers, where he had 50 rushing yards. How do you think JJ, what does he add to this game? And will we see him use his legs a whole lot to keep this aggressive defense honest?
I think that depends on the scheme Nebraska uses. If they are like bunched together, like you said, they stack like 8 in the box or whatever, and let's say it's like a third down and short, fourth down and short situation, and they're all focusing on the running back. That's where I feel like JJ McCarthy has to keep the ball. He cannot hand that ball off because I look at that as conservative, and you can't do that against the Nebraska rushing defense. You just can't do that. That'll lose you games, and that'll lose you momentum ultimately.
Yeah,
So I feel like he has to keep the ball in his hands in those type of situations if that's what their scheme is. Now, on the complete opposite, if Nebraska, spreads their defense, that's where, he has to read it. He can't just, have one read and then, throw it to that position. Otherwise, it could be an interception. So, and that's
absolutely.
not what you want if you're a Michigan fan. So,
Yeah, that's not what you want at all. Thank you, Chris Lane, another Ohio State fan. It's primarily Ohio State, Michigan, and Nebraska fans on this channel. Those are the three biggest fan bases. Um, Chris, thank you for the $2. Your support is never expected, but it's always appreciated. Thank you so much. Said you're late. No bother. Look, I more importantly had technical difficulties on my end, and again, I'm sorry about that. It's okay. We'll see you around. You're always active in the comments section, and thank you for stopping in and donating and supporting the channel. That's awesome. Um, I would say go Buckeyes, but you don't play anyone this week. Although there will be a video tomorrow morning talking about Ohio State's season so far, because they do have a bye. What do you think about their season so far, Ohio State? We can briefly talk about that.
let's start off with the defensive end. Ohio State defensively has impressed me completely. Granted, they've played, above average offenses at best outside of Notre Dame. Yeah, their defense has impressed me. I like what they did against Notre Dame last weekend in keeping Sam Hartman to a good degree in check. Right, they were up 10-0. Their defense was perfect. to say not perfect, but it was more than sufficient, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really expected Ohio State to allow Sam Hartman to only have 14 points, but that's what Ohio State's defense did. More specifically, their defensive line in Notre Dame's final drive, where they put pressure on Sam Hartman, and Sam Hartman couldn't overcome it.
Oh yeah. Um, Look, I agree with that completely. The only complaint I have for Ohio State defensively is just their defensive ends, and it's not that they're doing a poor job. They're just not. They don't have what Larry Johnson used to give that D line with that like explosive pass rush. But Mike Hall and their defensive tackles, scary. I'll get back to that really quick. But Minnie, thank you for the $5. You're welcome for the great content, but it's guys like Key and girls like you and followers like y'all that help make this channel great. So thank you very much for the support. Thank you, Key, by the way, for coming on. If I hadn't said that already. Um,
Anytime.
yeah, awesome. I love to have guests on here. One question I'm going to ask the chat is, what's your prediction for this game? I have some comments probably to answer in my own Nebraska preview video. What's your prediction for this game, and what's a key factor that you think isn't being talked about enough? And we'll get to answer your questions and your statements and review them after we finish talking about this game. And lastly, go Big Red, Jake. I hope that outside of this Saturday, your team wins the rest of their games. Go Big Red. Speaking of predictions, walk me through and walk us through how you think this game's going to go, what's an important factor or two, and finally your score prediction. I'm very curious.
All right, so how I think this game is gonna go. If you ask the average fan the same question, they would probably say that Michigan is gonna have this game close in the first half, or at least somewhat to that degree. I think it would all depend on Michigan, really. How will we play on the offensive end? Are we going to be conservative? Are we going to throw Nebraska off defensively? And then switching to the other side, will we put pressure on Harburg and make sure he doesn't beat us with his legs? If we can contain Harburg and if we can, I'd say, open it up a little bit on the road on the offensive end, I don't think this game is going to be close, really. And if it is a first half, game, so to speak, a track meet, like a low scoring track meet, which I can also see. I feel like Michigan is going to be the type to, adjust in the second half. They have defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, and I think Michigan will eventually kill Nebraska, like the boa constrictor reference, and come out on top and improve to 5-0.
Yeah. So that's the outcome that I also have. What's your score prediction?
My score prediction is 38-3 Wolverine.
Okay. I just wanted to get that before I mentioned my score prediction and also played a little devil's advocate. 38-3. Mine's 34-3. And I think that it will probably be close for the first half. There will be times where I'm, aware that my team is winning, but I also want them to win by more. Michigan has this funny thing where every game is they allow single digits to their opponents and they score around 30 points. And Nebraska and Rutgers, I think, are similar caliber teams. The difference is Memorial Stadium's an intimidating environment. It's on the road. I imagine the offensive line is going to have some struggles early. To play devil's advocate, in regards to Nebraska fans, because we're both Michigan fans. We both have Michigan covering the spread, despite the fact that they haven't yet. And we both have them dominating eventually. Don't you think that Michigan having not covered any game yet, this is they're favored by 18. Josh Pate, for example, he's picking Nebraska to cover. I know that Corn Crazed is picking Nebraska to cover. And with Michigan's, they've historically struggled against quarterbacks who can run. And against Nebraska in 2021, they had some struggles. And schematically as well, they have had problems when teams are able to challenge them at the lines of scrimmage, and Nebraska might be able to do that. Don't you think that a 30-point win might be too much? Like Michigan is favored to win. They're given nearly a 90% chance according to FPI. But is there a shot, a sizable shot, that we're overestimating Michigan here? Or maybe we're not overestimating Michigan, we're just underestimating how good Nebraska is now that they have a quarterback who doesn't fumble or throw a pick every time?
That's a really good question. And I feel like, granted, it was a different matchup last week, but a lot of Colorado bandwagons, that's what I'll, refer to them as,
Yeah.
asked the same exact question when Oregon was favored by 21. And then Oregon just doubled that. So I feel like this might be one of those type of games, in a sense, if we're talking about the spread. Um, Hopefully we win by a lot more than the spread this time around. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
just what I think personally.
And that's very understandable because Nebraska, they've been able to run, but they struggled running at times against Minnesota, though they still had the better ground game, and Minnesota's a good defense. They have had some inconsistencies in their ground game too, not just Michigan. And then when you see that Nebraska's a great run defense, and Michigan's rushing offense has had some struggles, but also Michigan's rush defense, when they have their starters in, they don't allow anyone except for really Gavin Wimsatt so far this year to pick up first downs. And I think really, if Nebraska is going to play this game in a competitive manner, if they're going to cover the spread, if it's going to be a game in the second half or fourth quarter, Harburg will have to be healthy. He'll have to play his A game, like you mentioned earlier, like a near perfect game. And a lot of that is it's so unlikely. Like the probability of the perfect game and of Nebraska running the ball successfully will also at the same time stopping the run successfully. By successfully, I don't mean they're decent at it. I mean Michigan, if they ran it 3 times in a row, would immediately be forced to punt the football. It is unlikely. It's possible, but I agree with you. That's why I picked it to be 34-3. I think Rutgers has a better offense than Nebraska does, and they have a better pass defense. The difference is Nebraska has home field advantage, and they have the better rush defense.
Right.
Okay. Let me look at these comments because I asked that question. So Hummus Hero, 24-7, Michigan. He, being an Ohio State fan, obviously says the team up north. He thinks both teams have similar strengths, which I agree with on a good level, but the Wolverines are just better coached and have more talent. What do you think about that?
That's a pretty good take, especially with the coaching aspect. It should be pretty obvious that, Michigan has superior coaching to Nebraska. It's just a question on if they can apply that. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of teams can have better coaching, than their opponent and still lose. For example, 2022 Ohio State against Michigan last year. You know, it looked like Ohio State had the better staff and all, and then Michigan just outcoached them more specifically in the second half. So that's a
Yeah,
pretty good take. I like that take.
yeah, yeah. I mean, rushing game, period, amen. Offense, defense, deep secondary. JJ McCarthy, I think, is the second best quarterback in the Big Ten when it comes to running the football. Better than Drew Aller just because he's faster and more elusive. Yeah, I agree. Dream in digital. Michigan wins. Nebraska beats the spread. The latter would not. It would frustrate me. It would make me doubt if my team was number 1 in the country unless Nebraska put on a show or got a garbage time touchdown. But I could see it happening. For obviously the previous 4 games have shown Michigan cannot or has not covered these spreads. Michigan has only scored around 30-ish so far. We're the best D they've faced so far, and we slow the game down. That's something that I talked about in my preview video. Michigan and Nebraska chew up about 30 seconds per play. which is outside of the top 110. What do you think about Dream and Digital's take?
From a biased standpoint, I have to disagree. From a college football unbiased standpoint, this is a pretty solid take as well. Michigan, for more so for Michigan, especially because, like you said, we're the team that likes to slow the game down, chew clock. We're not flashy. We don't need to run up the score like other teams do in order to win. And then on the Nebraska end, we have to make sure you know our defense gets off the field. Otherwise, it could be a very long game, quite literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So Michigan Man Moose. The reason why I was pausing is I saw this score: Michigan 45, Nebraska 17. If you added another touchdown to Michigan, that was my preseason score prediction. But then what happened is the clock rules, especially when applied to teams like Michigan, can take away up to half of a team's possessions if they were to play the same game in 2022. Um, what's your take on this, Key? And then I'll answer with mine.
45-17. I do feel like you said, it does depend on the clock, and how Michigan plays. If Michigan is just throwing haymakers in the beginning, which everyone probably doesn't expect from Michigan, given that we're a slow and steady team, I can see this. And then the 17 from Nebraska, I have a feeling that most of those points are going to be from garbage time. But it really just depends on how both of these teams play. It's not a bad take, but we'll just have to see. It depends.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I'm not going to go as bold to say that it's a bad take, but I think it's a questionable take. The over/under is 40. I highly doubt Michigan in against this team. Now, Michigan, I think, has also been playing. They've been playing down to their competition a little bit. I think this Michigan team has a lot more potential than what they're showing. Similar to Georgia, I think Michigan and Georgia this year are the definition of playing bored or playing business trip. They're playing the game of life while simultaneously playing football. They're not giving it their all. So if they give it their all, absolutely. But I think the under in this game is more likely. I also have a hard time seeing Nebraska scoring 17 points, and I have a hard time seeing Michigan score more than 38 points. About definitely possible. I think very unlikely though. One question that I want to get to, and then we'll start doing some weekly picks. Okay, Mini Hunt. Hey Sam, don't you think that when you were looking at Husker Online stats, you should really only consider the games where Heinrich Harburg was at quarterback? I'll let you answer first.
For this, if we're talking about from this game on, assuming that he starts for the rest of the season, then yes, that's a really good point. Otherwise, we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially when Matt Rule, he really wants Jeff Sims to succeed. Like he does not want to bench. He doesn't want to bench him. He doesn't want to
Right.
bench Mr. Sims whatsoever. And that's okay. But when he's turning over the football and dropping snaps, that I just don't get it. If Michigan comes out and they face, and Jeff Sims is starting from Nebraska versus Heinrich Harburg. Heinrich Harburg, if he starts, I'm nervous. If Sims starts, I'm still nervous because I'm a fan, but from an objective point of view, I almost take that as like initially waving the white flag. Like he's
Right.
too turnover prone. Boldly, I didn't mention this on Corn Crazed's channel, but I might bring it up to him at the end of the year if this comes through. Overreaction of mine that I'm not going to attach myself to right now. I think Harburg's a better runner than Sims is, along with a better passer. Like I think he's the better overall quarterback.
That's interesting.
I mean, he had two runs of longer than 70 yards. One was called back for a penalty, but he has stamina, he has speed, and those runs were in open space, but they weren't it wasn't like his side of the field was just completely untouched, at least on one of those runs. Um, Another comment, or a few of them are talking about how it's going to be warm tomorrow. A 93, it's going to be close to 100 on, the heat index, how it feels. How do you think that will impact these teams, especially
Oh,
Michigan?
yeah. All I'm gonna say is I hope they hydrate. They have to make sure they have the proper amount of whatever they're drinking to stay in this game because we can't afford injuries, especially in week 5. We're a little too early right now into the season to afford any significant injuries. More so, and on oh my gosh, and on the Nebraska side as well. Um, you know, health is the number one thing in life, not just in college football. So as long as both teams are hydrating properly, this should be a pretty fun game.
Yeah. Something, speaking of health, Nebraska, they lost Gabe Irvin Jr. and Ramir Johnson, sadly, to injuries.
Yeah.
Um, that I just paused because I hate injuries. Even on like opposing teams, there are some maniac fans who like cheer when injuries happen. That's messed up.
Right.
Michigan, Mason Graham's going to be out. I think Will Johnson and Rod Moore are finally healing up. Both of these teams have injuries, and I guess the last thing that I'd want to add, and I'd invite you to add to this as well. Thank you, learning something new, by the way, for the $2. His score predictions 21-3. He says Michigan's defense will surprise. 21-3. That'd be another push. Michigan's currently favored by 18, so they'd be 0-3-2 on the spread if that happens. Which is, look, that's possible. Nebraska's the best defense that Michigan's played all season, and they have a worse offense than Rutgers and an offense that is very prone to, having failings. I mean, even with Harburg at quarterback, they only scored 28 points against Louisiana Tech, who just has an atrocious defense. But Michigan's deeper than Nebraska, and Nebraska suffered injuries at running back. Reimer is going to play this Saturday, but he was dinged up as well. I know that the heat probably favors the Huskers, but along with maybe the wind. Um, but with depth, do you think that depth is the main reason that like you have Michigan pulling away from this game and winning this
One
dominantly?
100%. 100%. I feel like depth is probably a top 3 factor when you're looking at a roster, whether they're full of talent, with the quote unquote blue chip ratio or not. Depth is very, very important, especially if you're experienced, like Michigan. Nebraska doesn't have the luxury of that depth, as you just said. So if certain players or even players in general for the Huskers get injured or, get cramped up due to this heat, it'll be pretty unfortunate for them.
Yeah,
And Michigan will just have to, take advantage of that or vice versa, even.
yeah, absolutely. Dion Pryor said lots of cramps. Oh, that's likely going to be the case. Michigan should rotate in this game because they
Hmm.
have players who can rotate and still perform at a high level enough to win. Michael Hassman, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, losing him hurts, if not more than the backs, because it makes the offense one dimensional. I agree with that because Anthony Grant's still a really good running back. Again, only fumbled once this year. It wasn't a critical moment, so we all remember it, but almost had 1,000 yards last year behind a horrid offensive line. He has power, he has shiftiness. And Harburg and Sims, if they're both healthy and you're concerned about running back depth, you could probably put them on the field at the same time and get really creative. And that would be a nightmare to defend in running the football. But what you're saying is that it made the offense one dimensional, and that's another reason why I have Michigan holding them to 3, despite the power of that run game. Nebraska's receivers, especially Marcus Washington and even Billy Kemp. Billy Kemp's been good, but Marcus Washington's underperformed to preseason expectations. Um, okay. You think it's time to move on to score predictions for even
Let's
tonight's
do it.
game? Okay,
Let's do it.
sweet. Awesome. Okay, this is like one of my favorite parts of this collaboration. Okay, so number 10, Utah, taking the road at number 19, Oregon State. It is 7:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 6:59 p.m. Central Standard Time for Nebraska fans. Um, what are your thoughts on tonight's game at 9 p.m.? I'm going to be watching this game. Uh, what's your take? What's your prediction?
Defense, defense, defense will be the number one factor in this game. The first two, I would say 24 points wins this game. With or without Rising. I feel like defensively, both of these teams are pretty solid at the very worst. Utah has the top 10 defense in the country. If they can get Oregon State, to be contained, they definitely have a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a score prediction for this one either. I'm going with Oregon State. Their defense got exposed against Washington State, but
Yep.
Washington State is underrated receivers. Uh, Cameron Ward, I almost forgot his name. Shame on me. He should be in the Heisman conversation right now.
100%.
And I think Oregon State's weakness we now know is their secondary. It's not their D
Yep.
line. Utah has kind of the opposite offense of Washington State. They score less points. They have a good ground game. Their passing offense, especially without Grant Kuthi at tight end, is very limited. I mean, this was a team that held Chip Kelly's spread option with Dante Moore to 7 points and only scored 14, seven of them off pick six. Utah is
Yep.
practically the Iowa of the Pac 12 right now, except they have better talent probably everywhere. They probably have a better defense than Iowa does too this year.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. First team to 24 probably wins. Corvallis is going to be bouncing too. They're going to want to have revenge after that Washington State game. Okay, the Fighting Lincoln Rileys travel to play the Fighting Deion Sanders. Thoughts?
Man, I'm excited for this game. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than what people think. I don't think that the Oregon game was really 100% indicative of how Colorado is as a team. Like, you got to remember that about 90% of this team is transfers, right, from previous teams. So if Colorado can basically get the ball out within 3 seconds, they're competing in this game 100%. And USC secondary is, really, underwhelming to say the least. They made Arizona State's offense look spectacular to a degree. So I feel like this game is going to be a little closer than what people think. However, I just feel like USC's offense, and more specifically in the trenches, is just too much for Colorado.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree with that. USC's third in the nation in sacks, I think first in TFLs. What they don't tell you about that, though, is for USC, they either pick you off, force a fumble, tackle you for loss, sack you, or their defensive backs get burned and torched for touchdowns. It's a very dysfunctional, um, up and down defense. I mean,
Right.
Drew Pine looked anywhere from like John O'Corn to Tom Brady against that defense. It was very, very up and down. The game didn't even
Right.
make sense when you watched it against Arizona State. It made absolutely no sense. Like watching Cameron Scadaboo, who came from I think Sacramento State, an FCS school, and he has this amazing breakout performance. And then USC, they also allowed some sacks and pressure on Williams that was just really uncharacteristic of what you would typically think of a Lincoln Riley offense. The spread is 21.5 in favor of USC. What do you think about that spread?
About 80% of the nation may disagree, but I think Colorado covers this spread. I think they lose anywhere from 10 to 17 points. I just feel like it's because of the secondary of the Trojans. I just feel like they're just going to get exposed yet again by these Colorado receivers, which they have some really great receivers. More specifically, Xavier Weaver. He is a stud.
Oh yeah, Weaver's phenomenal, and then Jimmy Horn Jr. very good too, and I think Michael Harrison's the name of their tight end, and then gosh, they're Dylan Edwards, their running back. I mean, they have pass catchers everywhere.
Right.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, so there are some comments. I know you said 90% of people would disagree with you. I agree with you. I think USC only wins by 11. Dion Pryor agrees with you because he has them winning by, 21 USC, but that still covers the 21.5 point spread. I think that
Right.
21.5 is somewhat of a bad number. I'm not a betting expert, so don't listen to me entirely. But, 21.5 in a game where field goals are likely going to be few and far between. I expect probably one, maybe two field goals at the most. USC's probably winning by if they win by 14 points or more, they're probably winning by exact touchdown margins. I would not be surprised at all.
Neither will I.
Yeah. Another comment. Does Washington cover the 18-point spread against Arizona? I'm going to answer.
Absolutely. I gotta answer this one quickly. The receivers are just too good for Arizona secondary, and that's not a knock against Arizona. It's more so praise for Washington's offense. They have NFL caliber receivers with Jalen Pope, uh, Jalen McMillan. You have Westover, who's a very underrated tight end. I just feel like they're too much for Arizona secondary.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I saw that spread, and I know it's a road game, and I'm more familiar with Washington than I am most Pac-12 teams. Like my knowledge about Washington's than much better than Arizona. Jaden DeLora, though, very high ceiling, very low floor. Penix is number one in QBR. Penix has 16 passing touchdowns. His main
Insane.
receiver, Roma Dunze, 27 receptions, 4 receiving touchdowns, 544 yards, and he also had a punt return against Cal. I guess the hope for Arizona, and the spread now moved to 18.5. Hope for Arizona is, can they test Washington's secondary? Because that's been a concern in the past, and no one's been able to test it so far.
You have to agree with that. If they can, to a degree, I'm not gonna say expose, but give blueprint to a degree on Washington secondary, they could possibly cover it, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree.
And another note, before I move on, this is a game because Washington has a bye next week. This is a game that Washington cannot overlook whatsoever. They cannot look on to Oregon in this game. They have to focus on this game like it's a business trip and move on.
Yeah, the margin for error is so slim. I mean, if they lose to Arizona, you have Oregon, you have Oregon State, you have Utah, and you have USC remaining on your schedule, and Washington State. All 5 of those teams, I think, are like top, in my opinion, top 15 caliber teams. 5 of
Yeah,
them. There's no margin for error if you're Washington.
correct.
Yeah. Learning something new said, "I bet Washington's." That's one. Okay. Well, I hope we're not wrong. I hope. Um, okay, number one Georgia at Auburn. What's your analysis here? What do you feel?
I'm torn about this game because I just wish Auburn had an offense. I just wish they had a competent enough offense to make me be like, okay, I think they can compete with Georgia, but I just don't see it. No matter where the game is located at, I just don't see it. If it happens, great. If they even beat Georgia, that would be awesome for me as a Michigan fan. But I don't know. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I have a hard time picking Auburn to upset just because. I mean, mm, no college football nerds thinks their algorithm thinks Auburn matches up well with Georgia because Auburn can run the football. Georgia has been sketchy at run defense. But between Robbie Ashford, who can run the ball but can't throw, and between Peyton Thorne, who's bad at throwing and also mediocre at running, Georgia could probably stack the box with 7 or 8 players all game and not have to worry about a singular big play.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, Auburn's best chance is to get a lead early and to get the crowd engaged. I mean, they have to come out and, hit a hole in one, I think, on their
Right.
first drive or in the first quarter. My pick, along with yours, would be Georgia. However, I don't know if Georgia's going to cover or not. I feel like it's almost hypocritical to a certain degree for me to pick Michigan to cover, but then Georgia to not. Then again, I think that Auburn, having played A&M, A&M is a good offense. Their problem is their defense. I do think Michigan's better than Georgia. I also think this is more of a rivalry game. And Auburn, I think overall, probably has better athletes defensively than Nebraska does. Also, Carson Beck and Georgia's running backs have not been performing as well as Michigan has. Georgia right now is a less efficient offense than Michigan. I'm not
Right.
going to talk about spread. I'd lean Auburn to cover, but I don't want to get too deep into that. I'd say Georgia wins, though.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, if Auburn does somehow pull off this massive upset, which they can do because they're in Jordan-Hare, and that's huge. They tend to play good against Georgia in Jordan-Hare. Man, Michigan fans will be smiling if we end up winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Utah, Oregon State. We have the unanimous consensus from us both, and parts of the chat. Oregon State's gonna win. We think that
Yep.
USC wins, but Colorado covers. And we have some
Yep.
suspicions about Georgia, but we think that they're going to win. I mean, I even have them at 4th in my poll. I think Washington, Ohio State, and Michigan would beat this Georgia team right now, and probably for the rest of the year. And Penn State, outside of my own personal reservations for James Franklin, just because of his record in big games, I think Penn State right now looks like the more impressive team than Georgia. The problem is Auburn is just what they are right now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Michigan Man Moose, the no defense bowl. USC versus Colorado. Yeah. Grinch, if USC wants to succeed in Big Ten play, Grinch has to go. He has to be fired.
I agree. Because the Big Ten is a physical conference. It's a defensive conference. So, you're not going to win playing soft defense. Just ask Ohio State.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And even with Ohio State's soft defense in 2021 and their defense that caved and folded like a lawn chair in big games last year, those defenses are miles better than any Alex Grinch defense that we've seen. They're even better
100%.
than Grinch's defense in 2018. Like, he was a coordinator with the Buckeyes in 18. That defense was worse than any defense Day has had. They just had Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, who was a great quarterback. And the Big Ten that year was weaker than most people thought when Michigan and Ohio State entered that game 10-1 each.
Man, 2018, every time I think about that year, I just think about the what if, right? Just what if Penn State did not choke against Ohio State in 2018, because they had that game won. And the Maryland game against Ohio State. What if he catches that 2-point conversion? Michigan goes to Indy, despite any result to Ohio State.
Yeah.
So,
it's
that conference was really weak in 2018.
Yeah, it just goes to show that football, there's games where it's blowouts, but then there's also games where it's just by inches and by a single one perfectly executed play.
Right.
Oh, wow. I'm already full of energy. I can't wait for Oregon State, Utah, and I'll get to finish the rest of my Chinese food during that. Number 24, Kansas, at number 3, Texas. Texas, according to Greg McElroy, is the most complete team in college football. They're third for a reason. I disagree with their placement, and I respectfully disagree with Greg McElroy, while also admitting he knows a lot more about football than I do, obviously.
Right.
What do you think about Kansas traveling on the road? I mean, they won in 2021, but then Texas just, flattened them like a pancake last year. They're favored by 16. Kansas right now looks to have the better rushing offense, but Texas probably is the better passing offense and also the better defense.
Right. This will come down to the line of scrimmage. More specifically, Kansas offensive line and Texas defensive line. If Jalen Daniels can be protected and they can make plays and actually move downfield, because field goals aren't going to do it, Kansas has a chance to compete in this game. However, on the other side, we have Quinn Ewers, Jordan Whittington, Xavier Worthy. They're just too explosive for Kansas secondary, in my personal opinion. And with the home field advantage, I just feel like there's going to be another huge factor for the Longhorns, and I think the Texas Longhorns get it done.
Yeah. You think they cover the 16, or you think Kansas is too competitive?
I'm torn with this one. I think Kansas covers.
Okay. I think that at the end of the day, we'll reflect on this game and we'll talk about how the game was closer than the score indicates. I think Texas pulls away late and covers, just given the nature of Steve Sarkisian and that explosive offense. But I think it'll be competitive. There's things I disagree with Josh Pate about all the time, but there's also a lot of things I agree with him on. And Texas, I don't think is going to overlook this game. They might if Kansas came in with a loss or wasn't undefeated, but Kansas defense looks better. Their offense has been a little up and down, but Kansas, I thought they were a top 25 team to begin the year. I'm happy to see they're getting respect by the AP poll and by others. Texas, on the other hand, it's a home game. Like if they were on the road at Kansas and maybe it was later in the season when some hubris can set in, I might take that. But this is different.
Yeah. I'm also doing stats for all three of these games listed too.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are 3 or 4 games that I'm doing.
And make sure to check out his holy cow. I'll pin your Instagram tag in the live chat. But before that, thank you very much to Chimichanga Guy. $20 super chat. That's humongous. Thank you very much. Looking forward to another great stream and weekend of football. Oh, just a side note, my YouTube is actually starting to gain some traction after tons of work. I'll have to check out your YouTube, Chimichanga Guy. I remember clicking on your profile because I do that to most people. I don't know if that's weird or not, but I looked at it and I did see you posted some videos. Now that you talked about it gaining some traction, good for you. That makes me happy. I'll check out videos immediately after the stream, see what's going on. Hope all is well, by the way, and make sure to be. Gosh, I can't speak. Be attentive in the morning tomorrow because there's going to be an Ohio State video released tomorrow talking about your team during the bye and asking you guys to answer some questions about what you think about the team. It'll help keep me entertained and also, busy in the morning and many other things too. It'll be great. So thank you again for the 20. I'm going to look for your Instagram. This is in the description. I'll copy it and paste it in the live chat so people can check out your content. Again, Key, very stats-based guy, just the facts, lets you, make the decision. Tell me what you think about this score. This is very interesting. Texas 36, Kansas 27.
Texas defense will have to play their absolute worst / Kansas playing their absolute best for this to happen. Do I see it? No, personally I don't, but it's possible because college football is so unpredictable. You never know what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that probably, in my mind, from my perspective, would accurately describe how the game is going to go. But I think Texas is just going to find a way to get like a stupid touchdown late, like kind of a haha in your face, like
Right.
pie in your face moment. Like whether it's a pick six, a fumble, or Quinn Ewers on like a fade or a play action, like something. I think Kansas defense eventually breaks down.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah. So his Instagram account is pinned in the chat. So I encourage you to click on it, check out the channel. If you do have an Instagram account and you're active, make sure to follow it as well. Okay. So we talked about Kansas, Texas. LSU, Ole Miss. I happen to think LSU is the best team in the SEC West right now. And I can tell you, my thoughts are LSU's going to win this game. Now, a lot of people are picking Ole Miss. Josh Pate's picking Ole Miss. Corn Crazed is picking Ole Miss. Um, a lot of people are picking Lane Kiffin to win this game, but I think Brian Kelly's a better coach than Lane Kiffin. And I think Jackson Dart's overrated. What do you think?
I have to agree. This might be a game where LSU just dominates. It doesn't even matter the score; they're just gonna dominate. Their wide receivers are just way too great for Ole Miss's secondary. Jackson Dart isn't that guy, to be quite frank. He's not terrible whatsoever, but he's not that guy. LSU's defensive line is pretty underrated in my opinion. That's probably the strength of their defense. Um, if they can get that going, I just feel like they dominate this game, even despite it being on the road. And I feel like they are the best team in the SEC West.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. ZZM. Kansas did beat them 2 years ago, right? Yes. I think 57-56 was the final score. Kansas went for two. They converted and they won. Um, yeah. Dominate. I'm not going to go that far, but I like that because I could totally. LSU's been playing mad, and KJ Jefferson and Arkansas nearly did the unthinkable, but I think they played a pretty good game given how their offense has functioned so far this year. LSU's played angry. They're frustrated that Florida State just dominated them because honestly, there's an alternate reality or several where LSU comes out and wins that game, and is 4-0 and looks like
Right.
far and away like a top six team or top eight team nationally, given everyone else's struggles. Um, I think they're going to win. I disagree about the dominance, but that's a bold prediction that I'd like, and I could see it happen.
Okay, probably a poor choice of words. I think they're going to control the game. I'm not
Okay,
going to say dominate. But I think they're going to control the game.
yeah. I mean, part of me with looking at that 2.5 thinks it's still going to be like a back and forth, but I can see where you're
Which I
coming
can see.
from on the control aspect of it. That'd be another game where Lane Kiffin just cannot be a great head coach. That would be
Right.
like that would not be encouraging, to say the least. Ooh, okay, finally. And I take a deep breath because I've watched a preview on this. I think it's very interesting. Um, Notre Dame Duke.
Man, this is exciting. I think, yeah, like I said, I'm doing stats for this game too. Um, Listen, let me start off with the Blue Devils. First off, I love what they've been doing so far. The way they did Clemson back in week one was just straight unexpected. If you told me that 13-point favorites in the Clemson Tigers, the number nine at the time, Clemson Tigers, was going to only score 7 points against this Duke defense, I would not believe, let alone losing by 21 points. And I just love Mike Elko and how he's structured this team. I feel like Duke is really, really underrated. One of the best teams, or one of the contenders in the ACC, in my personal opinion. And they have some studs, right? Riley Leonard, especially. Um, However, I don't think. that Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish are going to just, lose twice in a row. I just don't see it. They're very, very sick, as you did describe it in your preview video or recap video with Ohio State and Notre Dame. I'm sick for their fans, and I just feel like their players, especially, they're gonna bounce back big time in a really good game, and they're gonna enter right back into the top 10.
Yeah. Okay, so you think Notre Dame's going to win? Whew, this is so difficult for me. You see, I'm inclined to pick Notre Dame too, but college football nerds made a very good point that I think I found myself agreeing with. A lot of people aren't taking Duke seriously because they still look at the Blue D and think basketball school. And I found
Which is funny.
myself, yeah, and I found myself thinking, I think I've even fallen for that a little bit. Notre Dame, they're favored by the Devil's number, 5.5 on the road. That's what Mike Valeni would call it, the Devil's number, and it's stayed. It stayed there. So, I guess on principle, and also I think that looking at this game, I probably have underestimated Duke from a ranking standpoint. And Notre Dame, they lose games they should win. I'm going to pick Duke to win, and I'm going to pick them to obviously cover, even though I think Notre Dame's the better team. And it would not shock me at all if Notre Dame wins. This is a game similar to the Michigan State Iowa game that I just released a preview video for right before this live started. I think Iowa, more times than not in a 10-game series, beats MSU, but I think in this game, Michigan State wins. I think this is I think from my perspective, that's the exact same thing here. I think Notre Dame, more times than not on the road, would come in here and beat Duke in a 10-game series. But I think Duke, they're not coming off of an emotional loss. In fact, they've been hyping themselves up for this game probably for quite some time. And they have home field advantage, and they have a good rushing offense and a solid defense.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I even forgot to include the fact that the graphic Duke is ranked.
Right. They're 17, I believe.
Yeah, and I knew Duke was ranked, but we don't think about it. I mean, I'm also tired, so I'm not going to say I'm hating on Duke, but they're 4-0. They're in the ACC. That I have them ranked lower than 17th. I think for good reason. Just because I didn't think Clemson was as good as people thought in the preseason, and I want to see more. But I don't know. The Devils number, home field advantage, great offense, great defense. And I also think Ohio State was playing they weren't playing their A game, and they still won. Notre Dame played their A-plus game.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like the winner of this game, I would look at them as legit. And that's not a knock against the loser. That's just a praise for the winner.
Yeah, I agree. Beetle. Can't take Duke seriously until they win these games. Now, part of me instinctively agrees with you, but they also did beat Clemson. And I didn't have Clemson in my top 10. I thought that was kind of a heretical take that everyone agreed with, as Clemson was going to be this top 10 team. But I still had them at number 15th in my poll. And they came out and they out-physical Clemson. And Clemson, they looked competent against Florida State. Florida State, just at the end of the day, was the better team. So I don't know. I take Duke seriously. It's just, I can see where you're coming from, I guess. Another comment talked about Notre Dame's O-line will dominate Duke.
That's interesting. Because they're a really physical team. Can I see it? Yes. Do I see it? I don't know yet. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm gonna put disagree. I think they will outdo Duke defensively, but I think Duke is good enough defensively to where they'll be able to not just get manhandled every play.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, it's a road game. road test for Notre Dame's O-line. Notre Dame, they played against Navy. Oh, they also played against NC State on the road, and their O-line on the road against NC State, they gave up a few sacks, like 4 of them. And Sam Hartman, by quarterback efficiency, he had a very impressive game by passer rating. Quarterback efficiency, he just had a good game. So I think there's something that the road could not be a friend, especially to Notre Dame's offense.
Right.
Okay.
I think this game is going to go down to the wire, by the way. I think Duke covers, but this game is going to go down to the wire.
Yeah. You're thinking like 31-28 Notre Dame.
Yeah, something around there.
Yeah, okay. I could totally see that. I don't know about Duke's special teams. Like, I don't know about them. Like, I don't know if they're good, bad, or what. But I know Notre Dame is Spencer Schrader, who's a pretty reliable kicker. So
Right.
I could see that. Okay. Any other games that you're thinking about this weekend?
The final game that I want to talk about, I want to retouch on the Iowa-Michigan State game.
Okay.
I did make a statement, and I said one of these two things will happen. Either Michigan State's bad defense, aka their secondary, is going to make Iowa's bad offense look good, or Iowa's bad offense will make Michigan State's good defense look good.
Yeah, I think it's just it's vomit versus vomit at 7:30 p.m. on NBC in Kinnick Stadium. That's the best way I could put it. State has the better offense, I think, clearly. Iowa has the better defense, clearly. Both special teams are impressive. I'd have to go with the LeVar Woods coached special teams unit over. I forget who Michigan State's special teams coach is. Understandably so, because their unit was horrendous last year.
Yeah.
But who do you think wins that game? Or are you not going to pick?
I've been going back and forth with this. Personally, I'm probably gonna have to go with Iowa, mainly because of Michigan State secondary, and I feel like that's more big of a detriment than Iowa's offense, which you can disagree with, but I just feel like Cade McNamara is gonna look like how he looked in 2021 against Michigan State.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that.
It's not. It's gonna be close. It's gonna be close, 100%. I'd probably say the first to get a touchdown wins this game.
Yeah. All I can think of is just like the misery and like the amount of punting, kicking, possibly the amount of mistakes. I mean, Iowa had 6 fumbles against Penn State. I know Michigan State doesn't have Penn State's defense, but they have some physical players up front, like Jacoby Windman, who can definitely strip the ball from you, and then Noah Kim, Caden Hauser, and their offensive line for the Spartans hasn't looked good. I said earlier, and you heard me, I'm picking State to win, but I think in a 10-game series, Iowa would probably win this game 6 or 7 times out of 10. I just think it's going to be weird. Like, to me, it's just a pick. Like, most things back Iowa to win this game.
Right.
Yeah, they're favored by 10.5 too. It was 12.5, but it dropped. So if you had Iowa winning by 11, for example, and you're sticking with it, that went from Michigan State covering the spread to Iowa covering it. So even though it's 2 points, it's a kind of significant move. But actually, any other games you're talking about? I'm going to look up something really quick.
That's about it. We covered every game that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, understandable. We talked about a lot of games, like 8, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. 42% of the bets are on Michigan State to cover. So there's a sizable amount of people who are looking at this game, including some experts from Action Network. By expert, I mean a guy who's went 22, 34, and 2 against the spread. So take from that what you will. But, yeah, I can say that my potential power, my power rankings would definitely have Iowa covering this game. And those predictions will be released tomorrow on the Patreon, by the way. So if all of you want to support the channel, like Super Chats, for example, I love super chats. I love when you guys support me. It's awesome. It's never expected, but it is appreciated. A better way to support me, just because YouTube takes about 50% of your super chat money and pockets it, a better way to support me would be Patreon, if you can. Like whether it's just, even if it's just for 1 month or 2 months. Depending on your tier, if you go All American or Heisman tier, you do get special content. You do get weekly picks against the spread from my personal take, what my model thinks, which is experimental. I'm testing it out. And there will be power rankings videos starting next week that will also be on Patreon. There'll be extra video content as well. So Patreon, it's in the link of the description. I'm going to post it right now in the live chat. If y'all are curious about it, check it out. It's a new thing for me. I imagine it's a new thing for many of you, but here y'all go. You said that's all the games you wanted to talk about. I understand. It's 8:35. We've been on here for an hour, 16 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah. If there's one thing about this week that you'd have to say before we close, what is it?
Let's see. This week, like I said last week, separates the legit teams from the fraudulent teams.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because last week we had some big time matchups. This week they're not big time, but like Michigan, Nebraska, Georgia, Auburn. There's plenty of trap games. There's plenty of games where if you have issues, they will and can be exploited. Plenty of those. So that's actually a take that I wouldn't have thought of, but it's totally correct on your part. If Georgia isn't a top 5 team, or if they're maybe not even top 10, we'll know. And if Michigan is the same way, I think we'll know. And more importantly, for a team like Texas, if Texas isn't a playoff contender, I think Lance Leipold's a good enough head coach and Kansas is a good enough roster where they might win, like outright. And then, funny enough, we'll be talking about Kansas like they're the TCU of this year. Because if they beat Texas, they can beat anyone. If they can go into Texas and win, they can beat anyone, like on their schedule. And that would be nuts.
Right. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. We've been on here for quite some time. We started at 7:15 just because I was trying to get my Michigan State video up, and also Key and I were trying to, communicate and, set up this show. It was mainly on my end, as to why we started later. But typically 7 p.m. on Thursdays is going to be when we'll go live. The only reason I didn't go live yesterday was because I had a stream with Corn Crazed at 8 p.m. and also because the best time that FitKey's schedule was 7 p.m. on Friday. I think I'm going to do, or at least consider, streams on Fridays as well. I think Quick Picks is better going live than making a whole video about it. It's less editing for me, and Quick Picks it's not a big time video, but let me know what you think in the comments. And also, yeah. So thank you very much for tuning in, honestly. And thank you very much, Keith, for coming on. Remember to check out his page, guys. CFB_stats_ on Instagram. Okay. ZZM, Sam, any Michigan fan that can talk positively about my Buckeyes has my respect. And same to Ohio State fans who can talk positively about Michigan. Thank you. And you're welcome, Dream and Digital. Thank you very much for coming on. All right, guys. Have a great night. And we'll see you all later. For lives, Thursdays at 7 p.m., that's going to be a consistent thing. And I'll let you know if stuff changes. But that'll be a consistent thing. It just didn't happen because I went live with Corn Crazed. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow